Smart speaker. It is News Talk KZRG. Ted Bojorquez.
And Steve Scott.
And joining us this morning is Frances Floresca, who's here to tell us about some pretty crazy stuff going on in the news. Frances, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Frances, there was a really wild event that took place, or rather news that broke this week that I was very, frankly, not expecting. And that was that police in a liberal-run city have arrested 1,000 migrants. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Oh, my goodness. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, Chicago in the first place is a sanctuary city, and there are all these migrants who are all of a sudden flooding into Chicago who are getting arrested, of all things. And on top of that, the government is spending millions of dollars to house these migrants and take care of them. And it's very unsurprising that this is happening in the first place. And the people of Chicago have to go through this, and it's unfortunate.
Now, the crazy thing, Frances Floresca, is that this isn't just Chicago. There's a lot of these liberal sanctuary cities that are seeing this mass influx of migrants, and there's a little mystery on how they're getting there. I know that there is some work from the Biden administration to actually kind of fly them in. But I'm curious from what your thoughts are on why is Chicago the one that's fighting back over any of these other liberal cities?
I think Chicago, they have been trying to fight back over this because the city is already very dangerous to begin with. I mean, crime rates are through the roof, and it's even considered the #1 city right now for the most murders in the country. And there are 70% of Chicago voters are just unhappy with how Mayor Brandon Johnson has been handling this. And even half of the city's voters just don't even want sanctuary cities in the first place.
All right. It's Frances Floresca joining us here on News Talk KZRG to talk about the 1,000 migrants that were arrested in Chicago as of late. And Frances, can you walk us through what are these arrests for? Are these for violent crimes? What's the statistics on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so around 75 of them are violent crimes, and then the rest of them are for driving and traffic offenses, and some of them are listed as nonviolent crimes in the first place. But, you know, a crime is a crime. And there's just a lot of arrest data that has been seen. I mean, some people are trying to say that, oh, these people aren't violent felons. I mean, aren't most of us not violent felons in the first place? It's not exactly an accomplishment. It's just kind of an expectation we should be having of people when they're immigrants or not. And I do feel for many of these migrants who do come into this country to seek a better life, but at the same time, there are just people, these migrants who are being made look bad because of people who commit crimes.
Right. And yeah, to your point, that is kind of the bare minimum, right? Not being a violent felon.
Exactly.
It's Frances Floresca joining us here on News Talk KZRG. Now, Frances, from what you have been able to gather, I know in these liberal cities, they're very big on this whole catch and release, no bail sort of mentality. The city of Chicago, are they in that wavelength too? Are they arresting these migrants and then just releasing them again, or what's the process?
So what I've been seeing is that they have been arrested. I mean, Chicago police doesn't even officially track this data. A lot of these are more from national numbers that are tracked. As from what I know, they haven't I don't know if they've been let go. I'll be honest. I didn't look into that, and I can look into that at some point. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're being let go. I mean, murders are happening on the streets left and right in the city of Chicago, and it is not a safe place to be right now.
Yeah, and you know, Chicago, not to speak ill of Chicago, but it has always kind of had this stereotype of being a little bit on the sketchy side, and throwing this whole mess into it just really took it over the edge.
Exactly. And it's it's just honestly, as I said, it's pretty frightening for people there right now. And having it have the most number of murders in the country is already frightening enough for all the people there.
Right, exactly. It's Frances Floresca here to talk about the 1,000 migrants that were arrested in Chicago. Now, Frances, is this a sign, do you think, that things are starting to kind of turn around? I mean, could we say that the pendulum is finally swinging back, or do you think this pushback against migrants in the city of Chicago is a fluke?
I mean, I think there's already a lot of voters' remorse on who people are starting to vote for, but unfortunately, they're still likely to vote that way again, and not much is going to do unless people start to vote differently than they already do. But it's Chicago, so you never know what's going to happen. And as I said, half of voters just don't want these sanctuary cities, and 70% of Chicago voters are unhappy. So I do hope something changes, but at the same time, it might not be likely, but you never know what's going to happen.
Right, you never know. And Frances, what is the dollar amount that Chicago is spending on these migrants?
So currently, right now, here we go. So they recently just approved $70 million on top of $150 million that has already been signed to migrant care. And the Chicago City Council just recently voted on that proposal to deal with that crisis. So it is a lot of money, and Chicago is already a city that's been struggling financially in so many different ways.
Wow, that is a tremendous amount of money. And that's all local money, right? That's not federal grants or anything?
Yeah, that's just money that's been assigned to the city. And I don't even know what the numbers are when they're coming from the federal government and even coming from the state. Because I heard there are even still millions coming from the state as well.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that's an insane amount of money. It's Frances Floresca here to talk to us about the 1,000 migrants that were arrested in Chicago. And Frances, I was curious, from what you've been able to tell in your reporting, is this just a Chicago thing, or are we starting to see more sanctuary cities, more liberal-run cities across the country start to push back against these migrants?
I have seen that there have been several cities trying to push back. I mean, I see it in the more conservative states that have been doing this compared to some of the more liberal cities. But hopefully there will start to be more pushback. I mean, I think people everywhere around the country have been pushing back on it because nobody wants these. Virtually no one wants these sanctuary cities. Virtually people are scared about how migration has affected their cities.
Right. Especially, really, to me, the thing that is crazy to me is just the dollar amount. I mean, that statistic you gave us of that many millions of dollars for one city to pour into this sort of new novel problem is crazy.
Exactly. And I did find that number for Illinois. So they have already given around $182 million from the state. And that's already on top of $250 million for other shelter and such. So that's kind of crazy that they've had even more money come from the state to help with the crimes in Chicago.
It's just totally nuts. It's Frances Floresca joining us here on News Talk KZRG. Frances, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for educating us on this issue.
No problem, and thanks for having me again.
We'll talk to you soon, Frances. It's News Talk KZRG.
KZRG.